when we were picking up, we were talking about the number 10 pick with the Jets were getting Jermaine Johnson. And Joe, I was going to say right here, I don't know a lot about Jermaine Johnson because, frankly, Florida State has just been awful the last couple of years, and I haven't really watched them. You know how many Florida State games I watched last year? One. I watched that first game where they almost beat Notre Dame, and it was like is Florida State maybe kind of sort of back? And then that game ended up being a huge misnomer because Florida State went on to lose to Jacksonville State on an awful play, and then the rest of their season just went down the toilet. And Notre Dame was pretty good. I mean, they didn't make the playoff or anything like that. So, I mean, this is one where I'm not saying Jermaine Johnson's a bad player, but yet again, I just don't like this pick for a team that I think is extremely deficient on offense.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I'd also say with that, one Florida State game that most of us watched, I think the only reason we probably watched that was the Labor Day night game where there was nothing else to watch.
Right. It was the main game, and it had its own time frame. It was, like a Catholics versus convicts redo. Like it was it was a big deal, and it lived up to all of its hype. But after that, Florida State didn't live up to the hype.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right, Joe, number 11, whoever wrote this article I'm not mentioned can finally rejoice in me agreeing wholeheartedly with the pick that he has. He has the Washington Commanders now. That's the new name of them, which is in my mind a very subpar name. I guess I've been kind of negative during this one. Going with wide receiver Chris Olave of Ohio State. I think this is a great pick right here. Of course, you can argue as to who's the best receiver between Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. You want to go with, Jahan Dotson, all these different names. I think Olave is a fantastic receiver, and the Commanders are a team that desperately needs some wide receiver talent because right now, I guess their number one guy would probably be Terry McLaurin. And I think Terry McLaurin's a fringe top 20 wide receiver at best. So they definitely need to get some more wide receiver talent, and I like this pick of Chris Olave.
Yeah, I think it's good, and it also speaks volumes for them not overreaching for a quarterback. Maybe they're not sold on their quarterback position, but they're like, let's address receiver, get that taken care of, and this is a great talent.
Yeah, I think this is great. I think it would be fantastic to have it like that. So I think Olave is a good pick. I mean, the guy is one of the best deep threats we've seen in a long time. He's got better hands than you usually think of as someone that's kind of a speedster deep threat too. And he'll go in there and get those tough balls. I'm a big fan of Chris Olave, and I would be, when we get to the New Orleans Saints, if he were somehow available, I would love to have Chris Olave.
Yeah, because what these teams don't understand, everybody tries to get quarterback first, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can do it in reverse. You can have a team, like the Buccaneers that were built perfectly and then add, a great quarterback. Like you don't have to, in my opinion, have this pressure just to target or overreach for a quarterback.
I agree with that completely. And Joe, this next pick would definitely be one, if it's done, that would be of that idea of the best player left on the board. And I don't disagree with this one. Based on what you said, you may disagree with this pick because you don't like taking DBs very early. But the Minnesota Vikings at 12 are taking Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame. I've heard some great things about Hamilton. I mean, people think that he is a future NFL, Pro Bowler. A lot of really good things said about him. And the Vikings are someone to me that they're pretty good when it comes to running back, when it comes to wide receiver. I think that Kirk Cousins is a solid quarterback, and their defense has gone a little bit downhill lately. And Kyle Hamilton's a guy who, probably he's getting knocked a little bit for what perceived to be attitude problems with him and a little bit of quirkiness. But in my mind, if I'm going to go DB, I would rather have Kyle Hamilton any day than what I've seen with Derek Stingley. And I actually kind of like this pick.
Yeah. I mean, I like it a lot better even than the number 4 pick the Jets had, like going quarterback. Like I like this talent better. Yeah, I could be okay with Hamilton here. And here's the other reason. I feel like if you're the Vikings, even though you're picking 12, you're one of those teams that actually could be on the fringe of contending for a wild card pick because, you've got a quarterback, you're paying a lot of money. You're in a division where outside of the Packers, it's a weak division. Yeah. And so you could wrap up some wins. And so with that kind of mindset, you can address a need like cornerback more easier, I think.
I think as well. I think this is what's the best piece that gets you to the next step, which is making the playoffs. And so I kind of like this pick. Joe, at 13, I think this is a great pick right here. The Houston Texans have the second first-round pick. And yet again, we're talking about instead of overreaching for a quarterback, this is one where I think they're actually really helping out their team and getting a big playmaker. And this guy has them getting Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State, who's excellent. I mean, him and Olave, you can't go wrong with either one. They're both fantastic. To be honest, if Jackson Smith and Jigba was in the draft, you wouldn't be going wrong with him either. And so I think that if Garrett Wilson was still around at 13 for the Texans, that would be a great pick for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that'd be fine. And, I think this is the Browns pick that they would have had that they probably traded with the Deshaun Watson trade.
That's correct. Yeah, this is the one that got traded to him from the Browns for Deshaun Watson. So I think this would be good. Yet again, there's so many great wide receivers in this first round. One thing I know about Garrett Wilson, he's supposed to be the best pure route runner out of all of the receivers you have in this. And you think for someone like Davis Mills, who is not the most talented quarterback in the world and needs some help, maybe a guy who isn't the fastest but runs the purest routes can help him build up some of those high percentage passes. So maybe Garrett Wilson would be actually a better play than Olave or even someone like Jameson Williams in this spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
All right, Joe, at 14, I love this pick because it just fits with this brand of football and this program so well. See, I mean, this guy, he's probably been mad at me earlier, but now I'm starting to get a little bit better with him. It's going to get worse later, but right now it's good. At 14 for the Baltimore Ravens, he had them taking Jordan Davis out of Georgia. I love this pick. I mean, who could you see Jordan Davis being anyone but a Baltimore Raven? He just fits them. And this guy referenced how he's kind of like Haloti Ngata was about 16 years ago. And of course, the Ravens, he was one of their centerpieces of their defensive line that they've had. I think this would be a great pick. Jordan Davis is an amazing athlete. He can affect things like nobody's business. I mean, when he's on his game, the whole middle of the field is just completely blocked up. And he, of course, was, one of the best guys on this Georgia team that just, I've heard them described as the dance team of destruction on defense this last year. And he's the centerpiece of it. He takes two offensive linemen away from you, which helps other people rush the passer. It's difficult to run the football when he's there. And the way the Baltimore Ravens play, which is slow, run the ball with a quarterback, with a running back, develop, give your defense time. Someone like him that's going to affect the ability of other teams to run the football and clock control, I think this would be a great pick.
I think so too. Like you said, it fits their culture, their DNA. They're great at drafting defensive players. And I always feel like anytime the Ravens draft a player on defense, especially, everybody else kind of looks around. They're like, wow, the Ravens like him. I kind of wish I had taken that player because they're so good at it. And this is also a team that even though they're drafting 14, I mean, if they hadn't had the injuries to the running backs last year, this would have been a playoff contender. I mean, this is a talented team that Davis is joining.
I mean, Joe, this is a team that if they made the AFC Championship or even made the Super Bowl, you wouldn't be shocked because they're not that many pieces away. And I think this is just a great way to continue a strength that they've had and maintain a culture. So I like the pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Joe, this next pick, if it happens, I think would be a monstrous mistake based on what's happened in the offseason. And this is at number 15. He has the Miami Dolphins taking Jameson Williams. And I like Jameson Williams a lot. I think he's a fantastic receiver that can be a game changer. But when you're the Dolphins and you've done all the things you've done in the offseason where you went out and you paid all that money to go get Tyreek Hill, I think they already get it was Tyreek Hill that they got, right? The Dolphins?
Yes, from the Chiefs.
All right,
yep,
so you got Tyreek Hill. You got Jalen Waddle. Why are you going out to get another first-round draft pick at wide receiver when you have a quarterback who you haven't distanced yourself from, although it never seems like they love Tua that much. I feel like I'm always hearing like trade talks about Tua, but then you have to no, Tua's our guy, but JK, we've talked to like 20 other quarterbacks. When you understand what Tua Tagovailoa is, which is a very accurate passer, but basically Gumby, or what was that, Mr. Bill, the old thing where, Mr. Bill would get crushed all the time, whatever it was, and get injured. Why on earth at this position are you not going offensive line or trading back to get offensive line when you have unbelievable talent at wide receiver right now. I mean, this would be just an idiotic pick if they did it.
Well, they did get Teron Armstead from the Saints, so I think he'll be their left tackle. They signed him, so that helps their offensive line. But you can never have too much depth, as we know, on the offensive line. You already, like you said, have an embarrassment of riches at receiver, and so to me, it doesn't make sense to add a receiver, especially this high.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, if you want maybe one more receiver, get him like in a later round, somebody that's more of a developmental piece. But if you're drafting somebody with a first-round pick at receiver, you're expecting them to start pretty soon. And so that just doesn't make sense to me, already having two high-level guys.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I mean, to be honest, like Jameson Williams is the same kind of receiver as Tyreek Hill. I mean, so why did you go and get Tyreek Hill if you're going to get Jameson Williams? Jameson Williams is a less polished version of what Tyreek Hill is and has been. So this receiver pick makes even less sense when you put it in that lens.
And you gave up all those first-round picks to the Chiefs for future seasons. And so you really need to be smart with this first-round pick at another position.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I would say offensive line would be the way to go. And if you're not going to go that, then maybe build on you had a good defense, but, now that you've done so much to upgrade your offense, maybe make your defense a little better. Maybe you look at someone like a good linebacker, a good defensive lineman, a good defensive end. So I don't really understand this one. I think this would be a very poor pick.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. And speaking of poor picks, now we're getting to the poorest of the poor, and we're at number 16 with the first Saints pick. And this is the reason I said that I was extremely against this guy from the very get-go when I looked at who he had the Saints getting. And Joe, I was just dumbfounded when I saw who he had the Saints going at 16. Tell me if you've even heard of this guy before. Trevor Penning, an offensive tackle out of Northern Iowa.
I have heard of him, so I may surprise you. I'm actually okay with this pick. I've heard that he's a guy that's consistently been in the top 20 on most draft boards. I also think the Saints need offensive line. I talked earlier about them losing Teron Armstead to the Dolphins in free agency. And so you've already got Ryan Ramczyk. You've got a great offensive line in every other position. I think this is a guy that can be a starter early on. And so I would be okay with the Saints going O-line.
Well, Joe, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with the Saints going offensive linemen, but I feel like the Saints every year reach for these guys who are from these small schools who end up being busts. I mean, in my mind, Marcus Davenport has been a huge bust. They put way too much money and traded away way too much future stock for a guy that's been an average defensive lineman to me.
Well, yeah, the mistake they've made to me is when they trade up for players, that are not as good as players they could have drafted if they had stayed where they were.
I mean, they went and traded 3 draft picks away for a Dayton tight end who's barely done anything. And that's the problem I have with this. If I felt better about their player analysis from small schools, maybe I would think this is a good pick. But based on their history, this means this guy's going to be an epic bust.
Well, what I'm concerned they're going to do is try to trade both of these picks, their 16 and 19 pick, to try to move up for a quarterback. Like, that's what really scares me, that they're going to try to overreach here. But if they can come out of this draft with an offensive lineman and a receiver in the first round, I would be satisfied with that.
Well, Joe, my thing is, if I were them, and we'll talk about this more when we get to 19, I think you go receiver and maybe receiver again, because right now they're so low on wide receiver talent. They have so much money invested in someone like Michael Thomas, who's doing nothing. And I was talking about being a poor teammate, with Derek Stingley earlier. Well, he can hang out with Michael Thomas and they can talk about what terrible teammates they are. And I will get to this later when we get to the Saints' next pick on what I think they can do right there with Michael Thomas. But, in my mind right now, let's say that all these picks had happened the way they said they were. You would still have Jahan Dotson on the board. I saw him in person. Guy's spectacular. He can do everything. He can be a running back for you. He can be a wide receiver. He can even throw the ball. You would still have let's see, you still have Mechie available. I probably wouldn't go up that high to get him, but he would be someone that's there. I mean, there's still a lot of other guys. You would still have Treylon Burks from Arkansas would still be available. So there's a lot of other good wide receivers that wouldn't have been taken yet. And so I would have definitely gone wide out at this pick. Joe, at 17 for the LA Chargers, that he has them picking Zion Johnson, who's an offensive guard out of Boston College. I don't know much about Zion Johnson, but I will say that with what you've seen so far, with how great Herbert's been in his first couple of years, and you know what, I've been very negative with the guy who wrote this article, but let me give a huge shout out to Jim Nagy, the head of the Senior Bowl in Mobile, because he was on our show and he said that he thought that Justin Herbert was the best quarterback he'd ever seen in person at the Senior Bowl. And Herbert's turned out to be a very good rookie quarterback and really proving right what Jim Nagy said. So I like building an offensive lineman to protect Herbert, who I think is going to be a star in this league.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with this pick. I'm completely fine with it.
All right, Joe, at 18, this will be the pick that the Eagles got from the Saints. They're going Trent McDuffie, who's a cornerback out of Washington. The Eagles are a team that I think probably could use a little bit of a boost on defense. So I don't think this is a terrible pick. But I also think that the Eagles maybe could have used some offensive line help for someone like Jalen Hurts, who, based on the way that he plays, is probably going to be a guy that gets hit a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad pick because you're getting kind of like that past that middle of the first round where sometimes, you can just get kind of best available. But to me, maybe you could do better.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think too. C+. All right, Joe, at 19, this is the one that made me want to throw my phone down when I was reading this. The Saints have their number 19 pick. We talked about how they went and got this Northern Iowa offensive tackle. Well, this guy has the Saints picking Kenny Pickett, the Pittsburgh quarterback. They're picking Pickett. And Joe, I don't want the Saints to go quarterback at all in the first round, but you and I have talked about this. There's only one quarterback in my eyes that is even worth first round consideration this entire draft, and that's Matt Corral if he's healthy. And that's it. And Kenny Pickett, in my eyes, is old. Number one, you're already getting somebody that's a couple years past where you would normally get a quarterback. B, what has he ever done against a good team? Ever. So the biggest accomplishment that Kenny Pickett has is that they won the ACC Coastal Division in a year where this is the worst ACC we've ever seen. They beat Clemson when Clemson had the worst team they've had since the first year that Dabo Swinney was their head coach. And that's his biggest accomplishment, is that he beat a bad Clemson team by Clemson standards. Yet again, we're talking about teammates. Kenny Pickett, in what has been the biggest game in Pittsburgh history since Dan Marino played quarterback there in the 1980s, opted out of it. And you're going to waste a first-round draft pick on a guy that literally had a team that, has gotten better and had their highest heights they've ever had, and he opted out of the game? No, sir.
Yeah, it's the antithesis, to Matt Corral, who, they're picking over him in this situation, who opted in compared to Pickett. No, I'm completely against this selection for, all the reasons that you articulated. And I've read today, I want to say, Dan, that interestingly, I think it's the Saints front office that's fueling this pick. I think the coaching staff is against it. I want to say they liked Corral or somebody else better, or didn't like that pick. But apparently, if this happens, it would be the front office leading it. But if I'm the Saints here, I'm going after Treylon Burks, Dodson. I'm getting a receiver here.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, especially if they do go offensive line first, they have to go wide receiver right here. I mean, the Saints have a pathetic wide receiver career. There's no other way that you can put it out there. The best wide receiver they have refuses to play, and therefore he's a liability. And that's where I was going with, Joe, is that if I were the Saints, I would go wide receiver, trade away Michael Thomas so that you can go and get either CJ Stroud or Bryce Young next season. I love Matt Corral. I would think it'd be cool to have him at the Saints. But let's be honest, he's no CJ Stroud and he's no Bryce Young. So why not trade Michael Thomas, get rid of all this debt that you have for a player that commands way too much money and frankly doesn't even want to be on your team based on the way he's acting. Get some more first-round draft picks for next year, get some more capital, and then you can trade up and you can get one of these elite quarterbacks next season. But meanwhile, guess what that elite quarterback's going to have if you go wide receiver? Some talented guys to throw the ball to.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I keep going back to. You don't want to overreach for a quarterback here, and I'm very afraid that they're going to do that, especially because right now they don't have that first-round pick next year.
I mean, Joe, you should never draft a quarterback in 19 when I can only think of two things he ever did, and one of them's not good. So he did a fake slide that created a rule change now where you can't do it. Okay, great. And then he opted out of the biggest bowl game that they've had in 30 years. So that pick would be horrible to me. All right, Joe, at number 20, here's a pick where we're talking about you don't want to overreach for quarterbacks. I wouldn't hate this pick, though. At 20, he has the Steelers taking Malik Willis. And, Joe, I like Malik Willis. I like the story that he has. He's someone that's gutted through a lot to get to what he is. It's a shame as an Auburn fan. I think if Gus Malzahn had made the decision to go with Malik Willis over Bo Nix, maybe he'd still be the head coach at Auburn. There's a lot of things that could have happened. And I don't think Malik Willis is the most polished passer. I think he's tough. He runs well. But I do think that he kind of fits with the Pittsburgh Steelers culture. And you look at the kind of the run first attitude that they have, the play defense. If they were going to go with a first round draft pick at quarterback, I kind of think Malik Willis would make the most sense for the Steelers.
Yeah, I could see it. I could also see them for some reason ending up with Kenny Pickett here, kind of like, having that hometown guy, kind of like Hutchinson going to the Lions. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. But yeah, I mean, you can't fault the pick if they get Malik Willis. Not really sure, what prospect in the first round is that much better than him, especially with the upside.
Right. That's what I think too. And I think he would get along very good with Mike Tomlin. I think that, that definitely seems to be, a good marriage in that regard. Outside of that, I mean, I guess maybe the Steelers, could look for, I feel like maybe they could actually use a little bit more on the offensive line would probably be a way to go. But I would say if they're going to go quarterback, I think Malik Willis probably fits them the best.
Yeah.
Joe, at 21, they have the New England Patriots taking cornerback Kaiir Elam out of Florida. I don't know much about Elam, but I do know that, typically when a DB goes to the Patriots, they're very smart about who they draft there. And Florida DBs in the last 10 years have been quite good. And so I kind of think this would, this seems like a very Belichick-esque pick that would work out. And I think this would be fine.
Yeah, I have no problem with that pick.
The only thing I would say about the Patriots not going, I think maybe this would be a chance for them to get a wide receiver too. I mean, what you looked at with Mac Jones out of Alabama is we saw a guy who vastly exceeded expectations. We knew how tough he was. We knew how good of an arm he has, but I thought he played great in his rookie season. And he still doesn't have a whole lot of talent to throw it to. It's an upgrade of what they had, but I would love to see the Patriots get. I think Jahan Dotson would be an awesome New England Patriot. And if he was available at this place, I think that would be a steal for the Patriots. And someone that I really think could just meld well with, he's from Penn State, so he's not that far away. He does a lot of different things, which might be kind of a new wrinkle for Bill Belichick. And I think that there would be a lot of local fans who would like him. So if Jahan Dotson was available for the Patriots, I think that would be a great guy for them to go get.
Yeah, I would concur with that. If you have one of those receivers like Burks or Dotson still available here, you may have to go for that.
Yeah. Joe, at 22, the Green Bay Packers, and this is really funny because I'm sure Packers fans, yet again, if this happens, will be throwing their hands up being like, why do you do this to me? Has Quay Walker, the linebacker of Georgia, going to the Packers. Joe, the Packers, we joke all the time about how they never help out Aaron Rodgers with high-level wide receivers. They just lost the only good wide receiver they have, and here they have them going for Quay Walker, a linebacker he's a great linebacker. Georgia had some great linebackers last year. But, Joe, I would argue he's not even the best linebacker that Georgia had last year. I think Nakobe Dean is the best linebacker at Georgia. And in my mind, why are they going defense right here when literally the only good wide receiver they've had since the very beginning of Aaron Rodgers being a quarterback and Devontae Smith is gone now? And Devontae Adams.
The conundrum you're in, you do have 2 first-round picks if you're Green Bay. I think they picked 29th or towards the end of the first round with the pick they got. They got the extra pick from the Raiders. But you run the risk, obviously one of those picks has to be receiver, and you could definitely argue for both. But you run the risk if you don't get receiver here at 22, your best bets are not going to be available more than likely at the end of the round. So that's the gamble here that they're taking with this player.
there's a wholly five, I think, of wide receivers, right? Maybe six. So you have Jahan Dotson, you have Jameson Williams, you got Drake London, who I'm still not sure about, but that's the ones that seems to be the can't miss. And then of course you have the Ohio State Wilson and Olave. But you get past, and then you have Traylon Burks. But if those guys aren't available, suddenly you've missed the boat on the really excellent wide receivers that are there. And if you're picking here at 22, one of those guys will probably still be there. But you're right, you get to 29, all those guys are likely going to be gone.
Yeah, that would probably frustrate Packers fans because I can see a scenario where if they get to 29, the Packers even get a different player and then wait and get a receiver like in the second round.
All right, Joe. At 23, this would be a great pick if he was available. This guy has the Arizona Cardinals taking Jahan Dotson, which, I think you can already see. I talked about Dotson so much. I saw him in person. He's just an amazing wide receiver. And really just he's a Swiss Army knife. You can do anything with him. And something else I didn't realize, too, that makes this pick even smarter is if he was available, the Cardinals lost Christian Kirk, who was kind of a similar type wide receiver from Texas A&M. And in my mind, Dotson is a much better player than Christian Kirk is, even when he came out of college. And so you would be significantly trading up if you were able to get Dotson at this spot for the Cards to help out Kyler Murray.
Yeah, and I think you also need some youth injected at that position at receiver if you're the Cardinals. I think you still have A.J. Green, but not as many young guys. And so I think this is a good pick.
All right, Joe, at 24, the Dallas Cowboys are picking Kenyon Green, guard of Texas A&M. Joe, I mean, with what's happened with Dak Prescott and his injury, can't fault them at all for going out and getting an offensive lineman. And, Texas A&M has had a very good offensive line the last couple of years, more so 2 years ago with Kellen Mond in his last season, but Kenyon Green would have been a starter on that team. And I think that the Cowboys have kind of an aging O-line, and I think this would be a great pick. And especially we talk about the hometown hero thing, a Texas A&M player playing for the Cowboys can only be good for, helping even more eyes to watch America's team.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some Cowboys fans, that always love to see them get the players at the skill position, but I think this is the player they need.
Yeah. Joe, at 25, the Buffalo Bills are taking Kyler Gordon, a cornerback out of Washington. That's interesting. You had two Washington first-round draft picks at cornerback in a season where their coach got fired, and they had a very poor season by Washington Huskies standards. Apparently, they had an excellent secondary.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Bills, you have one of the best rosters in the NFL, so you're just, drafting based on positions of need. I think at this point, what do you need to separate yourself and get over the hump in the playoffs? And I do think for them, secondary is a good pick.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, one thing that you looked at with the Bills is that there's no weaknesses at all in their offense, but they did get into a lot of shootouts, including the game they lost to the Chiefs. And you think about it, if this guy's a stellar cornerback, he could have been the difference between them playing for the Super Bowl and maybe winning it.
Yeah, he just has to get a couple of extra stops for him, and that could really, change it.
Absolutely. All right, Joe, at 26, the Tennessee Titans are taking Tyler Smith. He's an offensive tackle out of Tulsa. Joe, I don't know much about this guy. I will say that the Titans are a team that probably does need some offensive line help. Tannehill had a little bit of a drop off last season compared to where he was the year before that. And I feel like they're very solid when it comes to wide receiver, running back. I mean, they really have everything on offense except for that. And their defense is stellar. I mean, they're a team that vastly underperformed last year. And so if this guy is the best remaining offensive lineman available, then I'll say this is a good pick.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with it. The interesting thing is going to be watching the Titans next year is you kind of felt like last year was kind of their year, their magical season.
Yeah.
They didn't get it done in the playoffs. And so kind of interested to see, if this team can have a good season next year.
That's right. It's be interesting to see whether they lost that window or if they can just make it happen in a year where maybe the expectations dropped off because
right.
Joe, 27, the Bucks, Tampa Bay Bucks has them drafting Devontae Wyatt, who's a defensive tackle out of Georgia. The Buccaneers, I mean, Tom Brady's coming back, so they don't have the quarterback need. Of course, they still have all the amazing talent at wide receiver, good solid running backs. Their linebacker crew is excellent. Their DBs are excellent. I think Devontae Wyatt is an excellent pick at this position right here. And really, defensive line is probably one of their weakest areas. So I think that getting one of the anchors of that Georgia dance team of destruction defensive line and Devontae White would be a solid pick at 27.
Yeah, it's an area of need. I do think they probably could use some offensive line depth in later rounds, but I think this is the impactful pick they need in the first round.
Absolutely. And Joe, going back to the Green Bay Packers at 28, he has them picking in a pick that would make Pack fans actually happy for once. Treylon Burks out of Arkansas at wide receiver for the Packers. Joe, if he was available at 28, that would be a great pick for the Packers. I mean, I think I would be fine with them getting him at 22, to be honest. Burks was excellent on a team that really I thought was kind of limited in their passing game. They had a good running game. I thought KJ Jefferson, more of a run-first quarterback. But even with that, Treylon Burks never took a game off. He was great in every game, even games that Arkansas lost. He always showed out, and I think he's a guy that's going to be a star in the NFL. So I think that's a good pick.
Well, I think so too. It's almost so good you just expect the Packers to mess it up.
It's way too good for them to actually do it, Joe. So it's not going to happen. This guy, while I hope he's wrong about a lot of things, he's definitely going to make, I'm sure Packer fans, they read that, they're getting excited for no reason, because we all know the Packers aren't actually going to make a pick that good.
They'll draft somebody else with the first name Treylon, maybe like Treylon Smith from or his name's Treylon Smith, right?
I think it's Treylon Burks, isn't it? Yeah,
Treylon Burks. Yeah. So they'll say Treylon Smith and, be disappointed.
Although, interestingly, Arkansas has a running back that's more like a kind of a scat back that serves as a wide receiver that's also named Treylon Smith. That'd be kind of funny.
Wow.
Joe, 29, he has the Chiefs picking David Ajabo, the defensive end from Michigan. I think this would be a good pick. I mean, Ajabo was good. He didn't get as much hype, of course, as Aiden Hutchinson, but that Wolverine defense was good. And we know the Kansas City Chiefs are in desperate need of improving their defense. And so if this guy is a good pass rusher, getting a solid pass rusher on a team that really was known for their defense at 29 would seem like a good pick to me.
Yeah, I think you've got to either get pass rush or wide receiver. If one of those receivers like Burks or Dotson's available, you would, I think, go there maybe. But if they're not, this is probably, the best player available, and then you can wait and get a receiver in the second round.
Right. Well, Joe, at 30, the Chiefs also have another pick.
Okay.
The one at 29 was a traded pick, and it has them taking Christian Watson, who's a wide receiver out of North Dakota State.
Okay.
I didn't get to watch North Dakota State this year, but generally their players have turned out to be pretty good, I'd say, like in the NFL. And you know how dominant they are at D2, and when they play D1 teams, they tend to beat them. So I'm sure this guy's fine. In my mind, if all the other people that we talked about that you would want are gone, then maybe he's the next best guy. You can maybe consider like a John Mechie right here. This would be a good place to maybe pick up Mechie. But I don't know enough about this to say whether he's good or not, but I definitely think wide receiver is the way they should go.
Yeah, I think that if you can get a receiver here that you're happy with, that's where you go. Yeah.
Absolutely. Joe, at 31, the Cincinnati Bengals, who got so close to winning their first Super Bowl, has them picking Andrew Booth, who's a cornerback out of Clemson. Joe, on this, we've been talking about it. When you have a generational quarterback and you have someone who's been injured, why do you not pick offensive line in the first round? The Bengals, that is the reason they lost. There's one reason they lost the Super Bowl, and it's their offensive line. Their offensive line is responsible 100% for that loss. So why on earth, I don't care if he's a Clemson cornerback who usually turns to be good, go and get an offensive lineman. And in fact, trade up to get an offensive lineman. Don't pick at 31. They should be trading up to go get offensive linemen.
Well, I heard somebody say the other day that there's a center from Iowa that they had them looking at with this pick. And I would be okay if they went that route, if they got a good center that could be a starter from day one. But yeah, I'm with you to the extent that I'm adamantly opposed to drafting anything but offensive line if you're the Bengals.
That's the only position they should draft, is it. It'd be worth them giving up future first round draft picks to go up and get an offensive lineman. I wouldn't even hate it if you wanted to trade away a lot to go up and grab Evan Neal. I mean, seriously, it'd be worth it.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, at 32, and last but not least, the Detroit Lions got trade from the Rams. At 32 are drafting Lewis Seen, the safety out of Georgia. Joe, I think this would be at 32. Lewis Seen is a great player. I mean, we all remember him getting the pick six that sealed the game to win the national championship. A great leader. I would be okay with this pick. I would give this pick like an A plus if they had maybe gone and gotten an offensive lineman or a wide receiver earlier. If they do that, then I think this pick is fine. But if they go defense, then I think this is probably a poor pick.
Yeah, that would make it disappointing. I've also seen some reports that they could go quarterback here and get somebody like Matt Corral.
Now, Joe, if that was the case at 32, going and getting Matt Corral, who I kind of think would fit Detroit. I think that might be kind of a good fit for him. That would be solid.
Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting to see what they do.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, had a great time predicting the draft. Look forward to watching it on Thursday. Hope the Saints don't do what this guy said or anything even close to it. But knowing the Saints and how much they break my heart on draft night, I'm expecting them to disappoint me immensely. So I'm already mentally prepared for it. And I'm sure, if you're another team like the Falcons, you're going to yet again be like, why did we go and get another wide receiver? Because the Saints and the Falcons traditionally are the worst drafting teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of get my mindset prepared for the Saints to either draft a quarterback, that's an overreach, or at the very least, we'll be hearing all this speculation about them trying to trade up in the draft.
Here's my tongue-in-cheek prediction for the Saints, Joe. Which, this is an exaggeration, but me saying it means it's probably not going to be an exaggeration. They're going to trade away 2 first-round draft picks to go up and get Kenny Pickett at like 11 or 12.
That scares me. Like, I really am concerned about that, especially with them not having the first-round pick next year. Another thing, Dan, to take a flyer on, we've seen them in recent years get like a Marcus Davenport, or last year, who was it, Peyton Turner, from Houston. So it might be, a good idea to look at like most likely second round picks, that teams might overreach for in the first round. Maybe that's who the Saints get, somebody that has a second round grade that we've never heard of.
Oh, they've done it before. Like that Peyton Turner one last year, I think like one person out of like 100 had them listed as a first round draft pick, and the Saints went out and got him. So yes, that would not be shocking to see them do this. Or with all this amazing wide receiver talent, they go out and get like somebody you've never heard of, Yeah,
like somebody from like Texas El Paso or something.
Yeah, we're getting the number 1 wide receiver out of College of the Sequoias in California. What?
Mm-hmm.
So
that would be their MO.
That is their MO. And if you like what our MO is, be sure and check out all of our episodes on Spotify. Look at the Danny and Joe Sports Channel on Spotify. All of our episodes are uploaded there. All of our episodes the last few months are on our YouTube channel. So if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like many of you have and watch them, you can look us up on there. And then you can also follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show and like our Facebook fan page. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.